So it begins. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Tonight's episode's intention is mainly poetic. It is a tribute to a book I wrote. Um, I've written two books with Starlight in it, in the title. One, The Memories of Starlight, and one before that, The Eruptions of Starlight. The Eruptions of Starlight was a poetic work. This poetic work is, believe it or not, I've wrote the poetic work, and how would I say it? Guys, I wrote a poetic work that I have sealed, put it in an envelope, put it in this place where until the year 2022, I haven't even read the poetry of it. I mean, I've written it. I wrote it when I wrote it, it was more of an emotional feeling. But anyways, so 2022 is Eruptions of Starlight. That book's going to come out in 2 years from now. And there's this book I've written, Memories of Starlight, which was very, very important. I've even given talks on it. There's a talk called The Prophets of Starlight. And so I kind of noticed that the memory of the human being is light. Now, in this episode, um, there's a focus, guys. I wanted to wonder about this light that is in our eyes, that is our whole visual existence, which is our whole reality that we're identifying. It's the question of how far attention will move, inspired by light. That means you can look at yourself, of course, as a purely atomic, uh, physical, manifest creature, or you can see yourself as just an image, a scene, as if you're a movie scene that is directed by the light in your eyes, you know? When we look at the ambition of a physical creature, its major ambition is continuity and survival. That is one of the most immediate ambitions of the light in our eyes, to be able to keep itself as a self. Now, let us say the ambition of Starlight was met, that we found ourselves completely, in regards to our ambitions, on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, before we really get to the metaphysical components, or more of abstract components of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. For example, the confidence of the individual, the self-actualization of the individual. The ambition of light is to see itself. We're all constantly putting an effort to exist in this lightscape, this landscape that is made of light. The light is the land of the mind, you know. Now, I thought to myself, I'm like, okay, human beings are engaged with individual activities. Many human beings, their inner realms differ from the outer realms, and they're just doing their own thing, you know. But I wondered what would happen if all sociological considerations of human behavior were met. Imagine, in these talks, I talk about an advanced civilization. Now, wonder we lived through an advanced civilization. Everything became great. We experienced the epitome of individual human life. That means all your inner realm desires. Imagine they were met. Imagine a billionaire decided to be your guardian. Your guardian angel or something. And so all your inner realms were desires were met, and all the outer realm desires were met, and you had reached the peak of this game of light and form. What would the ambition be? And I find it fascinating that light from the sun in 8.3 minutes gets to our planet. It enters our eyes, and what happens to that beam of light? It gazes out as a self at the sun and dares to go beyond it. You see, so light is not meant to be static. Now there was a point where, guys, I noticed something today that I can tell you it was the most important finding, one of the most important findings, and I've left the talk to give it tomorrow. All I can say is tomorrow is going to be one of the most important talks I give in my life, you know. And the topic is light is geometry, you know. But anyways, I'm just saying that once the individual existence is satisfied, it's as if it's continuity in the unknown. What does that mean? That means evolution was this strange phenomena where an object became a subject to itself. The subject noticed it is not just the matter, it is not just the light, it is coagulation, let us say. You see, it's as if when light hits matter, a person can see a world. For me, guys, we tend to think that the human being has had a single creator. People feel they are just earthlings. But when we really look at reality, multiple systems simultaneously working. That means it's not a definition game. In this world, it's not about who holds truth, because everything is changing, wondering about truth in this world is like thinking one point in the roller coaster is the whole roller coaster, defines the whole roller coaster. For me in this life, my wisdom has come across in different ways. Usually physical wisdom, if you want to know about in front of your eyes. You simply have to observe. You have to watch the biological and physical program. Everything that I, to some degree, know about physical manifestation, you get the teachings from physical manifestation. Think of it this way: if you want a visible teaching, you need a visible teacher. If you want an invisible teaching, you need an invisible teacher. Now, what does that imply? That implies that certain states of knowing and being transcend the individual framework. So right now, the ambition of the starlight in our eyes is individual. We are a creature, the light enters our eyes, we see the world of our creaturehood, and then we engage that phenomena. So light is an authorization for movement. And I find this is a very key point, what's funny? This talk I've kind of left for tomorrow, light is geometry. I'm getting pulled by it because the listeners don't know what I mean when I say tomorrow's talk is going to be very important. The light is geometry talk. because I have perceived two patterns and I have seen the interaction of those two patterns, and I feel I have concluded a very new and also incredible theory on the evolution of our human design. But that's for tomorrow. Pretty much it has to do with the geometrical presence of light, but I'm going to leave that for tomorrow to explain. Pretty much I'm saying light entered our eyes. We're on a rock in the middle of nowhere. That light made us see some stuff. We responded to what we saw, but then we realized at the end of the day it was the light in our eyes. That was the projection. That means it's a very deep question that when a human being, let's say it's you and your girlfriend or something, and so when you look at your girlfriend, of course, there's all the cultural, social dimensions, the history of you two living together and all those moments. But then there is also this notion of where is the discrimination of the livelihood of the phenomena. That means, like when I see a squirrel on a tree, or let me just take it back to more of an intimate relationship of human beings. When you love someone, do you love just what is it you're loving? Are you loving the sight of them? Are you loving how they come across to you as if like your eyes are a screen of color, but just three-dimensional? Do you know? That means what I'm saying is how does the phenomena appear, and if we were to just treat light as photons, or recently they're talking about it in waves, if we just treat light as a particle, it's as if we reduce the value of the visual. So I feel that it is actually our irrationality that is helping evolve our rationality, because rationality is applied on an irrational landscape. If everything in this world was perfect, then there would be no imperfection. It would be a sort of the same deep, heavy philosophical question where some metaphysicians have dared to ask, and they're like, why? What is the point of an eternal being existing temporarily? That means some people don't accept the idea of reincarnation so easily, regardless of their metaphysical inclination of experience. You know, because why does an eternal, undying energy need to live? That means if we consider it's just energy moving. I remember I gave a talk called Life, the Grand Happening. So if we perceive all this as just energy, what are the ideas doing? Did the ideas come after the energetic movement? Because if that is the case, there is an incredible hollowness to the language that we're coloring our lives. And it's the question of how Rumi says, when I was younger, I was trying, he's saying, let me see what the quote was. Let me see if I can remember. He says, when I was younger, I was trying to change the world. When I got older, I changed myself. And that's the reality, because it's unknown. For me, the past is a known variable, the future is an unknown variable, the present is, the dance of the potential energy with the kinetic. In this wallpaper that I've chosen for this talk, we see an emotional girl that is so tired of the confusion of the planet that she has decided to go drifting in space. That means if the civilization is incredibly inefficient, it's better to drift in space. You know, if the system doesn't work, you know, it's like, why live in the system? That is the way human beings are thinking, you know. And it's the same with the inner realms and the outer realms. If the outer realms, if you're getting more joy from your inner realms, why should you care for the outer realms? You know, that was a huge question for me when choosing the disposition of my movement, whether it is inner or whether it is outer. That means right now, as I'm speaking to you, it's like the same time I'm giving this talk, my leg is also moving. You know, I sometimes people move their legs when they talk. What I'm saying is, like, there's an objective realm movement which I can very instantly pinpoint and have some range of certainty that the light in my eyes is showing visuals, and these visuals are in a three-dimensional space-time. Let's say, I mean, I can't bring time then because for the let's say it's a three-dimensional space. Uh, okay, in a time continuum. And what does that mean? That means the outer realms is divided into dimensions, but those divisions of dimensions are actually an inner realm phenomena. So you are a physical being, but how you are being you to you is not a physical phenomena. That's very key. You know, it was one of the biggest laughs of my life when I realize everybody who's suffering because of their identity or because of who they think they are, the idea of the who is not even physical. It's not an object. You know, if an object breaks, yes, cry for it. But if a thought leaves, if a thought comes and goes, if a thought breaks, you can't cry because it's instant, because the nature of the mind has a vacuum like constantly filling itself up with the next animate movement pattern in it. For me, there is something that this picture, you know what kind of emotion it gives me, this picture I've chosen for the wallpaper? I don't know who the artist is. Whoever who knows who drew this, please write the name of the artist and in the comments section. This seems to be what I would like in I've there's this idea pretty much then it's going to take me 10 years, but I've decided whenever I have my financial Rubik's cubes solved. This giant book series called "The Pillars of Civilization," which I'm writing the skeleton note form of them. But the idea is that there are certain values in civilization that must be defended, that must be protected, that must be shielded. Innocence is one of them. Innocence means a lot of human beings entering this system have no idea what the system is. And so, as they attempt to live in it and move in it, there is the innocence of not knowing, as if there is the unknown. You know what's funny? Many people fear the unknown. Many people don't want to think about what is beyond the visible. Let us say, what is beyond the sensory perception. But the unknown is where we awaken from, and it is where we return. And to fear the portal, the entrance and exit of this world is meaningless. To fear the entrance and exit, you'll stay in the room forever. Fear not what you are, because if there is, if there is 0.000, whatever amount of zeros you want, 1% chance that there is a totally different framework to truth underlying all of this, then that truth has to be. Do you see? This is the cool thing about the concept of truth. There are certain truths that they arrive when the person acts. It's the truth of the action. You know, that means if you don't exist, it's like, you know, like it's, imagine all the scientists, all the explorers, all the philosophers, all the inquirers, you know. And then there's another, where the leaf is no longer trying to calculate, the leaf on the tree is no longer trying to understand the wind in accordance to the laws of the tree. That means if you don't have an ability to see beyond yourself, most likely you're ideologically possessed. And that's terrifying. Ideological possession is real, guys, but it's real in a different sense. And when I say possession, I'm using it in the more extreme sense of the word, that an idea can capture you. This is why I'm telling the species from day one, I'm saying you're not language. You're not language, dear listener. You're not language. I'm using language. You're using language to hear me, but you are not the language. And if language defines you, then that's the program that has defined you. You can get crushed. You know, if the language defines you as weak, you will go on living a life ideologically possessed to only pay attention to your weakness. Did you know that? There was something in this Japanese series. It was called Vinland Saga, this Japanese comic book that had been turned into a show. And in it, there's this kid whose father is killed by this bad man, but the kid has no choice. And the only purpose in life for this kid is revenge. The only purpose for him getting skill and everything, becoming a next level warrior. The story is set in Viking times. And so there's a scene where there's this little kid, and this little kid is there on the battlefield, you know, and this warrior, the bad guy who, okay, long story short, this bad guy kills this kid's father. This kid follows the bad guy to take revenge, but because he's a little kid, the bad guy kind of looks at him and doesn't kill the kid. Right? The kid eventually grows up with this crowd of people, and his whole purpose is to anyway, something like this. So when he's a kid on the battlefield where there's war and people fighting with swords, he's a kid. This warrior, the bad guy who killed his father, comes up to him and says, "The weak die first in battle. The weak die first in battle." What does that mean? That means if you choose to declare your allegiance to your inefficient self, you will lose. Nature will push you, brush you off. I'm not joking. This is the difference between the karma, the conscious karma of deserving as the world sees it fit, not as you see it fit. There's a difference. There's a difference here. There's a difference between you feeling you deserve something and there being a sort of something coming from the world, you know? What does that mean? That means it's like the difference between you like writing one day and suddenly out of nowhere, imagine your girlfriend comes and, you know, kisses you out of nowhere, you know? So compared to you saying, "I deserve kisses." There was something considered in the psychology of certain poker players, in poker player psychology, where there are some poker players who go at the poker table and they don't feel they deserve the money they have. And so because they don't feel they deserve the money they have, the person goes there and they're subconsciously, they are okay with constantly gambling and, for example, losing it all. You know? That means the psychology of the human being is so incredibly fascinated that to just think that there is one reason for an event is meaningless. This whole idea of rationalism and irrationalism, rationalism has to do with your attention being in that moment. You know, that means you can totally be the most rational person, but if someone's talking to you, you're daydreaming about your childhood, it's like you can't give a rational response to them. you know, or the context you perceive yourself in. Like this was something I didn't know, but I could totally see how there are certain scientists who they feel kind of oppressed by this. What it is that when you look at, for example, scientists in the world, certain scientists, of course, are atheists, and you require to be a materialist to actually appreciate science, you know? Because if there is even the slightest factor of the unknown, this is why I categorize these talks as philosophical mainly. Because science requires something to that it can hold. Philosophy wants to know what happens when it lets go of what it holds or if it picks something new. But science has to actually get acquainted with the nature of the object. Human beings cannot be just rational creatures. There is a multidimensionality at work that we are not acquainted with. And for me, the only way I've been acquainted with it has been experientially, because I consider that we are a phenomena that transcends the language we have designed to define it. That means Mr. Within is in a love and hate relationship with language. When I see people thinking their language, I hate it. When I think, or let me say it, when I see that the person you see is using language consciously, but they're also aware of various ways that life is a flow. It's like I am surprised why so many people on this earth haven't questioned, haven't asked if there's a macrocosmic view and there's a microcosmic view, which view is reality? The nature of the world is multidimensional. As we go beyond the sphere of our planet, we see the whole game, the whole cosmic engine designed differently. And that's the thing. Right now, we could feel we're orbiting around the sun, you know, but what is the sun orbiting around? And what is orbiting around that thing that the sun is orbiting around? And what is that point of that, like some people have theorized, at the center of the universe, this giant black hole? For me, I don't know how people are even localizing space. For me, it's incredible. I mean, like I could understand Einstein speaking about time and space being curved. Like that still doesn't limit its edges. But it limits its mode. But we can't just. It's like it's not as easy. You can't um, define the world by a piece of paper. And would you want that? Would you want a piece of paper that explains everything? How can it? That means how many words would be required? How big does that a book require to be to explain everything? Even though people can't summarize through a sentence, I personally feel like people on their deathbed should write a sentence that summarizes their life, not per se just their last words, on the gravestone or whatever. Most animals in nature are born, not most, but certain mammals are born blind. They don't have sight. And so it's interesting that if we consider the mind as being a sort of eyes, It's as if that mind's eyes is like when the child is born is not active. The child, when it's born, its communication with the environment, it's through temperature. So I wouldn't be surprised that if our biological bodies are communicating with the environment through a language of temperature. That means when somebody comes and says, let's say some angry person comes to you and says, like F you, man, and so imagine you suddenly walking in this a gust of heat. That's probably not the right term to explain it. But like imagine this wave of heat suddenly hits you. So I'm saying it's as if the body is has is there is a language of temperature. This is why children, we call it love in a more general way, but it's intimacy with feeling they are alive. This human body has to feel it's alive, you know. But the thing is, without honor, whatever life it feels, it doesn't hold on to. If you don't have honor, that means it's good and bad. Let me tell you this advantages and the disadvantages of having honor and being dishonorable. Okay? The advantage of being dishonorable is that when something happens, you don't care. You don't care for the honor, so there is a freedom on the chaotic level. Okay, but in regards to honor, there is a freedom in the organized level. And so you remember, believe it or not, dear listener, what you care for, what is important to you. That means go and read every book in the world. You're going to see your attention will inevitably go to what is important to you. That symphony behind your eyes, that is every experience being like a note on a piano key of your life so far. And one of my science fiction guys, I'll tell you this chapter. It's not the chapter isn't complete, but I was working on it, and I remembered the time. There's this one of my favorite videos on the internet is this video from American Idol, where there is a contestant named Eli Matson, and the song is called "Walking in Memphis." You know. And so the judges ask him, like, what's your life? And he's like, he hasn't found a break and he's been going bar to bar with his talent and playing. For me, this man, I could totally see how he had dedicated himself to the skill and the art form without wanting something from the art form. Many people think that the outer realm has to immediately and instantly accord with your inner realms. I'm telling you, if your inner realms and outer realms are in sync, that's a blessing and a luxury, and you most likely have done the work before. You see, we are awakening to our mind fields. It is now we're reaching a point where the human being can't just be an object to itself. You have to also be attentive to how subjects are being people, how subjects are arising as creatures, characters. Because the way I respect law is that it is keeping the story of humanity stable. That means without law, like so many people feel, it's like there's this saying, I don't know who said it, but it was like, I disagreed with it, but in one angle, the person's like, learn the rules so you can break them effectively. I'm like, are you serious? This man wants to break. His intention is to break rules. How about building new rules instead of breaking the old ones? How about updating the rules of man's mind? You see, it's not all rebellion. It's not all resistance. Back in the day, I could totally see a reason for rebellion. If I was talking to you right now and we were people in the street for the French Revolution, I could totally see, because the people are starving. The fat king's eating chocolate in his palace, and so it's like a messed up situation. So there needs to be a balance. It's a symbiosis of power and that which the power is upon or being used upon. You see, there was one of the Louis kings. I think it was Louis 14 or 13, 14. I think, Louis the 14th sequel. Louis 14 or something. I don't know. One of the Louis, okay? One of the Louis French kings. And he has this thing where he says Lestat, I don't know how to pronounce it, but he says, I am the state. That means people were like, sir, how do you want to govern your nation? And he's like, govern my nation? I am the nation, whatever I want. So men have tried, especially, like, you got to think of it this way. Imagine in the future, they make cyberspace technology where you come home after work, connect that cyberspace technology, and you can be a king, a god, an emperor, in whatever cyberspace simulation or reality, a virtual goggle reality you program. So now imagine back in the day, there wasn't virtual reality goggles for the person to become a god in their own experience. But the only way was that it was an authoritarian power position. So you can say all those people who went into, became dictators and tyrants and went to control massive levels of people, these were like kids who wanted to be gods. It's childish. Being a dictator is a child who didn't grow up. I'm not joking. Because the point of power, it's like there is nothing to control. We are a very baby, the species civilization has taken baby steps. You consider the history of our planet and how recently we have suddenly become creatures that are speaking and can communicate and can, even the concept of control and value has come. Do you know what it is? It's like, build an advanced civilization, then be a dictator. Don't build like, don't, it's like we don't need farmers fighting over sheep. Because if it's sheep, the whole species is doomed, right? For me, any human being that is denied freedom, and when I say freedom, you see there's a potential of freedom. Everybody is potentially free. But for example, what is it that we have noticed in, for example, these recent protests we see going on around the world? That even though you can live in a country where there's a universal declaration of human rights, a freedom, you have a freedom as a human being to express yourself in this existence. Now that freedom remains as a potential until you actually express that freedom. You understand the value of your own freedom, or it reaches a point where the expectation, the illusion that everybody is free breaks. For example, the messed up thing that happened with George Floyd that's in the news. Do you know, it's as if like it was as if, it's as if people who should be angels became demons in that moment. Do you know? It was an incredible tragedy, but it was showing that we were under the assumption of freedom. But the psychological behavior, that means people have to treat other people's minds as environments. You know? That environments that could be wild. That means imagine you see someone, it's like this. It's like, imagine this. Everybody has a wild animal in them. And I think before people get married, they should, before they have these huge commitments, they should get acquainted with the wild animal of inside each of them. Do you know? Because if you can't see beyond your inner realms, I feel you shouldn't have children in this world. It's a bold statement, guys. Sorry to say it, but I feel if you can't notice how the world is moving in other ways other than how you see it, then you cannot even see life to communicate with it. That means that was the thing for me. I had an experience, trust me, like in my youth, I was really around people who were esoterically inclined. And I saw that. And I realized people were just running to the soul without wanting to comprehend what the mind is. And for me, the mind was like the bridge between the body and the soul, but it was a mystery. I couldn't see the bridge. I couldn't see its design until in 2015 or whenever I noticed that mind is language moving, is moving language, is living language. It gives me even goosebumps to say that. but it's like the mind is another life, another lens on the vision upon the moment. And when you realize this, then you wonder who's looking through the camera, and then you have found the mystic's mountain. For me, it's this massive movement where everything is changing. Even the smallest part of particles are vibrating, you know? Right now, I am looking at my yard, and it's dark. And I see this tree that had color, you know, couple hours ago, has now been engulfed back into the unknown. I feel that light hitting the planet, this constant, I call it on and off switch effect, cosmological on and off switch effect. This on and off switch effect, what does that mean? That means imagine on a cellular level, because in evolutionary biology there is this consideration that we were a creature that was in the sea, and then we stepped out of the sea. That means the furnaces of life were actually in the ocean. You know, in the not in the ocean, but I'm saying, like, I mean, tomorrow what I'm going to say is going to totally change the way I'm talking about these things. But like after tomorrow's talk, my I'm going to open my whole. It's going to be an update on all the things I've been saying to some degree. I'm just saying that that moment where the evolutionary creature that was unconscious of a subjective selfhood but was aware of an objective possibility to move, it's like the purpose of life was material until minds developed. And when minds developed, the purpose of life became the purpose of a field of being. Right now, I do identify as an individual. I'm a person sitting on my porch giving this talk. But at the same time, there is a collective life where I ask myself, what is the identity of the breath in the lungs? What is the identity of a simple living moment alongside all other simple living moments? In simplicity, there is an you find your collective life. In complexity, you can pilot your individual life well. That means I know this personally, that when I come to give these talks, I have a very different approach to speech. I draw speech. I don't, I don't know if the way I speak is that I perceive like an empty piece of paper, and then everything I say is a line being drawn on this piece of paper, at the end of it being a sort of geometrical form, you know? Hopefully, before I transition out of this plane of existence, I can attempt to create a prototype of a geometric language that I feel geometry is going to be the next great language of all languages. Geometry, guys, is divinity. We're going to realize that at some point. And then we're going to freak out. And then we're going to celebrate. This is one of the most intense pictures, guys. Let me tell you why. This girl has tears on her eyes because she is never going back. And that's what the past is. We're always flying beyond the atmosphere of our past. All right, guys, I'm going to look at the chat section. Okay, what's going on here? Okay, welcome everybody. Okay, nice, nice, nice. Jeremy Doe says, what if light is just the reaction of the electrical interaction between cells? The electrical interactions between cells. Yeah. So Jeremy, I'm going to tell you, scientifically, they see four major forces to this life. There's the strong and weak nuclear forces, and then there is gravitational force, and electromagnetic. So it's cool that same way you can look at your body and be like, oh my God, am I just muscles right now underneath the skin? You know, the same way you can also look at reality as just an electromagnetic phenomenon. That's how I feel Nikola Tesla was watching it, looking at life. Like Nikola Tesla, I'm going to show you guys a picture of Tesla. You're going to see how badass this dude was. This dude was like 1,000 years. He was enjoying an entertainment that we don't even enjoy today, you know? So guys, this is one of the most important people in history. If you don't know who this is, you don't know the value of the technological world you live in today. This man is known as Nikola Tesla. And this picture is terrible. Hold on, let me find a better picture. Check this out, guys. This is, oh my God, why are these pictures so small? Oh no, this is okay. So guys, this is Nikola Tesla, this man. And you can say, like, look at the guy writing. Look at the guy writing underneath all those electromagnetic. Like, this man is comprehending the electromagnetic nature of reality. Such an incredible human being. The president at the time when Nikola Tesla passed away on the radio told everyone that this was the most useful human being that has ever lived. Nikola Tesla, guys. You know why? Because he wondered about the mysteries of the world and he took steps towards it. That is the true meaning of life. We are fearlessly marching into the unknown towards the meaning. Guys, the thing I was saying about Vinland Saga, it was Vinland. I mentioned it, so I'm just reading the chat section. Okay, guys, I feel free to ask, philosophical questions. Anyways, I gotta lower my voice a little bit. Okay, let's get back to the idea of the ambitions of Starlight. When I wonder what the ambition of Starlight is, it all has to do with consideration of a mind. It's wondering the same time light is going in your eyes, does that mean your mind is the mind of that light beam? You know? Or does that mean that light beam is the whole visual of your mind? For me, light is very remarkable. It is something that is filled with design. And as tomorrow you're going to see me in the Life is Geometry talk, light has sculpted the potential of nature. Light is consciousness. That means without light, what would there be? What would you be conscious of? You could have been a creature, but it'd be a creature moving in a dark room, so there would be no form to engage. Light has opened the world so that our eyes could open to something. So for me, it's like nature is a genius. Man is always a teacher of nature. Nature is your, uh, I would say, is your greatest teacher. When you realize that, you'll find unknown contentment with the world. What is the ambition of a candle in a dark room? With every breath trickling towards the end of time. What is the ambition of the temporary? You know, I also see that evolution is strange because it's an eternal urge. It is an urge towards eternal continuity. For me, light, I can I have two relationships with it, I can say. I have a relationship of like just seeing light outside and with my biological eyes, and then I have the relationship with light as a memory in my subjective realms where I can move as it if I choose to. You can move as anything in your inner realms. The inner realms is evocational and it's unconditional. What does that mean? That means I can visualize right now like this coffee cup in my hand just hovering in the air. I can visualize it, right? But I can't pick up that coffee cup and that coffee cup doesn't fall to the ground. So it's like visualize just right now, whoever you are listening to this, just try this out. Visualize whatever object is in front of you just hovering in the air. Just a copy paste version of that object hovering in the air. Okay? Now, Mr. Within has a question for you. Why isn't gravity acting upon your imagination? Why aren't the laws of science fixed in the subjective realm, in the inner realm? Do you see that? Do you see the freedom behind your eyes before you are whatever in front of it is? Mr. Within would say the ambition of Starlight is the advancement beyond the language threshold. That means if the causal value of the phenomena is movement, then movement wants to continue before going towards that which is unmoving or static. And you know, guys, what's precious about this picture? You can see what she has packed. You can see she's packed her stuff. She is trying to get out of the world of her past. And sometimes that's the only way to treat the past. You just realize you've walked through it, it's over. The simulation ended. Now your attention awakens to new simulations, usually on a daily basis. You know, I've written a lot of poetry, believe it or not. Like, you know, free flow kind of writing. And I can tell you so much of that writing was not conceptual. And you might be like, what do you mean, Mr. Within? You didn't have the concept before you wrote it? And I'll tell you, no. There was an emotional movement of the image in the inner realm. You see, I thought the inner realm was just pitch black abyss. I thought when you close your eyes, it's a pitch black abyss, and at most you can visualize, like in my youth, I could visualize letters. Like, I don't know, maybe my mind had seen a teacher write on a blackboard, so I could walk around and look at any wall and visualize letters on it. I had that much of an imagination. But I didn't feel I had an imagination then, like an open inner realm that I could notice. After some time, it changed to, and I call it internal cinematic language, you know? The internal cinematic language of every director, writer, author, artist, and believe it or not, every human being. You first are conditioned to think through the rationality of a linearized, structured language. But then your mind begins moving through images if when you understand that all words at their core are pointing to something. A word is a symbol. So, interesting question from Mr. Grateful in the chat section. What is the ambition of darkness as a counter? He says as a counter question, what is the ambition of darkness? You see, darkness can't be even conceived if it is there. You know, darkness is, that's the thing about evil, I can even say. Now, I know you're saying darkness in regards to absence of photons, but I'm saying there is a certain point of any extreme action where the archetype of the person from a past, present, future gets possessed into just the imagery of the archetype in that moment. So you can be this idea they said of this, like what back in the day people perceived as possession was actually subconscious, inefficient awareness to the unconscious. What's another way I could say it? Darkness is space. To ask what the purpose of space is only limited to the questioner, as Rene Descartes concluded. So when we ask, it's like, what's the greatest question to ask? Who's asking the question? What is that who? What is the nature of it? Are we brave enough as a civilization to wonder about how far our insight into psychology can go? Or should we fear the mind and try to nullify the abstract efforts of the past rather than try to comprehend them? This is why I dislike, not dislike, but I'm telling you, Civilization 1.0 is like, it has facts, it's like a fax machine level mythology, you know? That means it's like there is no effort for legend. There is no effort for human beings trying to do something that is you see, it's like, what vision are you inspired by? Are you as a human being just influenced by what you see in front of your eyes? Or are you also attentive that whatever you see in front of your eyes It's like that's like a chemical, you're like a chemical, and the process of seeing life is a chemical reaction, a sort of certain components of your life where you are in the domain of your free will. Like I can move my hands, I could move, in 3 dimensions, but I can't change my DNA structure suddenly. Maybe through a cyclical habitual behavior, the genetical pattern will be directed differently. But I'm saying, you know what I mean? So for me, it was as if majorly, if you just see your outer realms, of course, there's the desires, the game. When you're in a game, the only thing you can do is play it, you know? You can choose not to play the game, but the game still goes on without you. So that's the way of life, where the person wants to participate, not just it's like a lot of people's psychology is they want to be part of an event where they are more than themselves in that event, you know Guys, here's Mr. Within's playful vision on what the ambition of Starlight should be: to build an advanced civilization, then wonder why it built, and then wonder what it is, to wonder truly what it is. So, anyways, Mr. Grateful, I hope that was a good answer. Honestly, darkness is nothing before nothing. Before nothing, the term could even be created. It's the unconscious moving the conscious. So we are on the conscious side of the coin, and we're like, yo, look at this whole unconscious. Let's look at this whole unknown and how there's so many unknown factors to life and whatever, you know? And then, if we were on the unconscious side, we'd be like, wow, look at after all these endless eons of just being a field of intelligence, we managed to become particular in it for a certain time. So I feel like if there was a chance, if I'm saying, so whoever's listening, relax. I'm just saying if. If there was, let's say, 50% chance, like a coin flip, that we were mind before we were matter, then matter will feel like a simulation to itself. If matter was here before mind, mind will also feel like a simulation. There's no way actually in this life, in a changing world, not to feel in an instant the view is a simulation. The cool thing is the universe is moving. It's not like we're living in a picture on a wall. We're living in a changing system. So I think intelligence in a changing system is just if you're aware of the change. I think there can be no greater definition of intelligence, just how you're riding the waves in accordance to the value system. So, anyways, guys, I'm gonna open it up to Q&A for 10 minutes. If anybody has a question, feel free to share. If not, the talk is over. Let me just check the subtitle if I forgot something. Yeah, beyond ambition means beyond how language is making us a character in a story that can want something out of the story. So beyond ambition would mean a psychological position of the creature that is inseparable in the consideration of intelligence of world and self, you know? So it's like the inseparability of the self and world will be actually that which is beyond that vision. Yeah, so anybody has a question, feel free to share. Okay, so Aziz says, is there starlight everywhere you go? Um, no, if you go in a dark room, there's no starlight there. But I think the way we can see is that, let's say you can remember starlight, you can go in a dark room and you can remember starlight, so the subjective the subject of starlight is everywhere, or at least whenever you're conscious. I mean, in deep sleep is like we kind of go into an experiential dark room, where in deep sleep the person is not an object or a subject, right? So yeah. So Mr. Grateful says, mixing emotion with communication, do you think it adds additional gravity? Do you think it adds additional gravity? Here's the thing. Communication has two components. I want you to think of it as a vehicle. What does that mean? That means, or think of it as a technology, language. Okay, we communicate through words usually. I don't know, like an opera singer. I don't know, maybe like there's of course sign language and braille and different ways of communication. What I'm saying, like, communication is like a language and there is a user, right? So when I come to speak about something, I take note from Aristotle, where he says it's the sign of an educated mind to entertain an idea without accepting it. So I am technically visualizing, or seeing in my inner realms what I want to say before I say it. So even if I, whatever happens, because it's internal cinematic language, I just have to put words to the image. So the way I communicate is, it's like I'm seeing a film and then I translate it. You know, that's the way it's happening for me. Now, that film, my response to that inner film sometimes brings emotions. Sometimes it doesn't. I say flow with it. You got to realize that you are a creature of attention, and the value of this attention is in a strange position where if you don't give yourself a value, the world will give you a value. If you give you, and you can give yourself a value. Here's the thing: it's either the self defining the world or the world defining the self. All theories of knowledge, I think, divide in this filter. They go through this sieve. Is the self giving meaning, or originating or creating the value, or is it the world that is creating the value? If you think the world is creating the value, you're a materialist. If you think the self is creating the value, how can you be a materialist? So yeah, so I would say it's not, you shouldn't think about what to say. You should, here's the thing, like, speak when the inspiration is there. That means it's like, I don't know, like, I've sat in silence a lot in this life. So for me, because I'm comfortable with silence, I'm comfortable with stillness, whatever, like, I usually don't have a fear of speaking, you know, because it's like fearing a paintbrush. Like, if you know what to do with the paintbrush, you don't fear it, you know. So I would say, it depends on who you are. Maybe you're someone who thinks through sound. Maybe you're someone who remembers everything through the voices of people, you know. Everybody's intelligence is different. That's why I'm saying our DNAs are like different instruments where everybody has to master their own instrument, and once they find their great melody or whatever, the great music they make, they gotta come and share it with the civilization. You know why? Because where else can you share it? What else can you do? You know, even though we all live in our own homes, we realize that, the world is out there. You know, what I hope to see after this whole quarantine, corona situation is over, what I like to see is a more gentler inner disposition of human beings to how fragile life could be, how someone who was your enemy could have perhaps by nature been, taken out. And it would be a sort of thing where you see everybody's finding a battle, even if you think there's a evil billionaire like the Simpsons, you know. You're gonna see that billionaire also is fighting a battle. Everybody, the inner realms are equal. It doesn't matter if it's the king or the peasant, you know. The inner realms are equal because it's based on sight, and it's based on how you pilot your intelligence. Because this is the only time you have. This is why, even though I appreciate and honor mysticism, but the point of life is not to go in a cave and become nothing, you know. you know that nothingness is, that absence, that, I don't know if I can say absenceness. After some point, you start hearing the cries of your world, and you just advance towards it. That means some people, they just want to help themselves. Some people want to help others. Some people are smart. They help the world, which includes their self and others. You know? So that means being helpful doesn't have to even have any sort of egoic framework to it. It's just, you're alive. This is your world. Assist it, for God's sake. You know? Honor has to be cultivated. It has to be small battles where you go through different moments and you stand your ground with the new, uh, moral, with your new moral context or whatever, or how you're choosing to ignite honor in your life. You know, because I realize, remember, guys, that we are in a world where you transition out of it. So the mind is here to prepare you for liftoff. The pilots of consciousness navigate as their whole plane of existence. I feel the concept of the pilot is the best one. In my school of thought, it's the best metaphor for trying to approach metaphysics. What does that mean? We have pilots externally going beyond the clouds of our atmosphere, and we have pilots who are going beyond, going to the depths of language and the whole psychological disposition of the civilization, with the story we're telling ourselves, the ethos, the collective inspiration of the peoples, you know? So Justin says, does ground exist in cyberspace or time? Cyberspace is a world inside a world. So inside the world, inside the sphere, cyberspace sphere, yes, it exists, but it's a simulation. Outside of the cyberspace sphere, it doesn't exist in the same way. It could exist totally differently. For example, in Vedic thought, they say like, I don't know, like a million years, how would I say it? Like in a million years, imagine. Sorry, not million years. I think it was like 54 billion years, which was like one day of Krishna, the god, sleeping. Like Krishna sleeping for a day was like 54 billion years for the human being or something. Like this deity in Vedic thought. Like, so I'm saying it's like there is that sense that beyond the simulation of how time and space is being experienced by our position, it's like when the location changes, the laws of the simulation are also changing. So that could imply that the mind behind behind, if there was a mind behind this universe, it is changing as well. So who knew God is growing up? So Mr. Grateful says, why do you like honor so much? Honor is a pillar of civilization. Honor means you see what has continued so far. Without honor, you can't evolve. Robert says, is it okay if your inner realms aren't clear? Your inner realms are not like your outer realms. So be very mindful here. We have to speak about it in a complex way, but it's actually non-locally simple, you know? So what I mean by that is that the inner realms are evocational. The concept of evocation means like you snap your finger in a giant auditorium, you know? So it's like it's evocational. It's suddenly that suddenly emerges, you know. So I would say your inner realms, this is the algorithm, let's say the mystical algorithm towards the inner realms and how it should be conducted. Okay, the mystics were like, okay, so if I'm saying life is an illusion, they started thinking life is a simulation back in the day, and they're like, if I'm telling life is a simulation, how is it being simulated? They notice it's being simulated by movement and by speech, by sound, right? So if you notice what yogis are doing, what meditation is the opposite of movement, which is stillness, and is the opposite of noise, you know, because you can say your thoughts are inner sounds. Okay, now, so the yogi would go towards the stillness and the silence, and in that stillness and silence, what happens is you start noticing what is moving before your free will moves. So if your free will can just be like a pond that has the ripples of it has settled, you kind of feel like you're your whole moment witnessing itself. Okay, so when you're in that state, witnessing your whole moment, you're going to notice not just the objective content of your moment, but you can also notice the subjective component. That means just because you're quiet and your body's still doesn't mean the mind becomes quiet. The mind maybe needs 10 to 20 minutes to become quiet. That means some people who get emotional go into just get out of, if you're angry or something, the first thing an angry person do is should leave the building. You know, anger shouldn't remain, or it turns into chaos. You know, anger is like a fire you got to put out when you see it. So I would say your inner realms are just how you're noticing where the thought of you is happening and how it's happening, and study your own mind. Go buy a notebook and become an explorer of the inner realms, just like we had people exploring how far they traveled around this world. You know, you're a human being. Every day you're an expression of human consciousness, you know. I feel every person should write a honest book on their inner realms and leave it behind for the civilization to share, to say, like, while we were living these lives that you see in history books, we were also living our inner lives. We had inner histories. We had dreams, visions, ambitions. We had various ways that we saw life happening. So you see, history is just the story of the visible part of really what happens in life. So anyways, guys, Justin says, does this happen to everyone who uses the internet? Guys, one thing I'm going to say about honor, right? Honor means you're keeping like an efficient technology alive. So really, you can't have honor if you're not, if you don't care. If you don't care, trust me, you're like a ninja. You don't care how you throw that thing at the samurai. You know, whether the samurai knows it's coming or not. But the samurai fights with a strange level of honor. An honor that it's like it gives the opponent a chance to be great, but knows itself greater. Like that's a different level. That's why I'm saying civilization, if it moves towards skill, it would unleash great freedom. That means it was like we were valued based on this the skill, like skill changed currency somehow. I don't know if that, it's very complex, some of these ideas. Really what it is integration of systems that have been living beside each other for so long, and we're going to see it. What does that mean? Businesses are going to become more like schools. Schools are going to become more like businesses. You know? The entertainment industry is going to become more like the educational sector. You know, the educational sector is going to, you know. So I'm saying it's a massive integration of the whole system, because even if we look at the educational system, it was based on the 1900s, where through, you can say, colonial times, soldiers had to go to one bunker, and there was only Morse code, and Morse code took a while. So the soldier had to go to one bunker, exactly memorize everything that was said and all the information, and run to the other bunker and relay the information exactly. And so you can see that at a time of war, the educational system is not trying to create businessmen, it's trying to create soldiers. So the educational system we find ourselves in now with this whole testing thing is is an ancient pattern. It's an archaic pattern, relatively, and so the educational system has to go through various reforms. So you can say the education of a nation is based on the most intense event happening in that nation. So, for example, if we look at, let's say, um, nations that are highly technological, you know, we see the ambitions of, for example, Silicon Valley, and for example, I'm just trying to say that the most intense event of a nation is what the people of that nation need to respond to. So you would say for that, it would be for, if I was to see the country of America, I would say the educational system has to go towards medical sciences and also programming. Children have to realize there is a digital transformation coming. First, technology was outside, was on our table. Then it became closer. Then it went on our ears, do you know? Then it went on our watch, you know, on our wrist. Then technology is going to come a point where it's going to go inside your body. Then there's going to come a point where technology it's becoming more intimate. It's like man and machine are becoming more the same as civilizations going forth, right? So I would say the medical sciences and how we are a natural human being should be the effort of the educational system, and let's say the technological sciences. Yeah, let's say the medical arts and technological arts. Yeah. No, we should keep it as sciences. You know. All right, guys. Anyways, thanks for tuning in. I hope this episode was helpful. Let us build an advanced civilization that its children don't want to get out of the earth as soon as they can. You know? Thanks for tuning in, guys. Much blessings and those.